Greetings, traveler. Have you ever been in a situation where you're working on a video game and you think that there is 1,000 different things you could fix about your game, but you don't know where to start? Or you have been working on this game for a really long time, you think that the game is as good as it can get, but players complain that they have this or that problem with the game, and you just can't seem to pinpoint what they're complaining about. Today, I want to talk about how I discovered one very specific reflex that I found myself doing whenever looking at a game that made deciding which things to fix about a game extremely simple and extremely easy to identify. So I want to talk about that today. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 14 years now. And when you work on a game, I found that basically you get tunnel vision. You know all the problems the game has, you know all the cool things that exist about the game. And after the months and years of you working on the game, I found that the state of the game, whether it's good or bad, it just becomes the normal thing for you. So that, of course, is problematic when a new player comes and plays the game. They're looking at the project with fresh eyes, and they can see all the things that you see in a completely different way. So there came a point where I wanted to have an experience closer to what new people playing the game would have. I knew that when I was looking at an area of the game that I hadn't looked at for some time, or I would go for a holiday for a few days and come back and play the game again, I would get this very visceral reaction to the game. I would get this gut feeling, as most people describe it, about the game. And for years I didn't realize that even though I was getting this reflex, I wasn't listening to it at all. And for me it was several years of a process to capture that feeling, identify it, make sure it's relevant to the game I'm working on, and ultimately use that feeling to identify what's the most important thing I should be fixing about my game at any given time. So how does this happen and how can we use it? Let's talk about that. So you have probably experienced the same thing the first time you pick up a new game that was made by somebody else. You're opening the box, you're putting the disc in, or you're downloading the game and you're running it for the first time, whatever it might be. And as soon as you're playing the first level, you get a feeling. Usually players complain that, oh, the controls are so difficult, or the game is too dark, or I don't know what to do in the game. All these things that you perhaps have complained in the past about other games, well, the same things are what players think when they're playing your game for the very first time. Now, of course, if you can have the player input early enough in the development, you can fix it, but after the game is out, well, it's out in the state that it is, so it's more difficult to fix these things. So I was thinking, what if we could capture that first look a player has into the game and use that during development? What if we could develop this muscle, this reflex that we all have as humans, and use it during development to improve the game, rather than wait for the game to be released and have other people tell us about all the different problems that the game might have? So the way that I managed to identify this reflex is basically keep some distance between me and the game area I wanted to check for at least a day or two. So work on something else, do something in a different area of the game, and then prepare an executable of the game, or just play the game in the area that I want to check. And right there, in the very first couple of seconds, when the game has just loaded in and I can start moving around the game, there I noticed I would get a reflex essentially about something in the game that bothered me. And this could be anything, right? It could be the lighting, it could be the response of the controls, it could be how easy it is to understand what the next objective is, or maybe listening to what the characters are saying was difficult because the character's voice was too low or too high or whatever. So I'm stressing this because for many years I would get this reflex, but I would completely ignore it. I would think, yeah, that's normal because the game is still not complete, we're still developing it, eventually we'll fix these things, and I was having these thoughts, and of course, after having these thoughts, I would forget them because we would go on and work on something else, right? Some other area of the game or some other task. And this essentially internal warning that I had built into me would go to waste because I wouldn't act upon it. So I thought, all these things, eventually when I would hear players' feedback, I would think, all these things people are complaining about, I have felt before. So why didn't I do anything about it? And then I tried to identify that exact moment where I get that reflex, and instead of ignoring it, amplifying it in my mind and try to dive into it as much as possible. So whenever I would pick up the controller or I would move the mouse around the game, and I would get this very slight annoyance, very slight, that looks weird kind of feeling, or what does that text say, or what was I supposed to do again, or man, this enemy is a little bit too hard, but because I know what to do, I can get over it, I'll fix it later. That tiny baby feeling that occurs when you first come up with this like difficult part of the game or unclear part of the game, that is the exact feeling that I wanted to highlight and make more noticeable in my mind, and dive deeper to find out, not just capture what annoys me about the game or what feels strange or not as good as it could have been about the game, but more importantly, why does it seem strange and what I can do to fix it. And the most difficult thing about capturing this feeling was that it happened so quickly when I saw something. Perhaps an easier setting to make you imagine this is, let's say when you first started watching this video, in these first 1 or 2 seconds, you probably made a reflex judgment about something, about my face or the room or whatever. It's that very first reflex judgment that you made, that is precisely the feeling that I'm referring to. And this feeling happens over and over and over again in a game, when we're playing the game, every time we encounter something new. A new enemy, a new area, a new mechanic, a new item, the looks of it, the behavior, and it can happen with any of our senses, right? Maybe we hear something strange, or maybe the icon of an item is not very clear, or the way the character moves around the game feels strange for some reason. As soon as we get exposed to this new gameplay element, or this new visual, audio, feeling element, or whatever, our minds are, I guess, programmed to have this instinctive reflex to that situation. That is what I was brushing aside as, I'm just thinking that, but it's not important, or yeah, this bothers me now, but we'll fix it later, surely, and we never did. And over years where I knew I had this feeling but I wasn't acting upon it, I had to focus more and more and more on it, until now I know to expect this feeling to come whenever I see something new. So try this perhaps with looking at a thumbnail for a YouTube video, or just clicking on the next video, or just playing the next game, and for sure in the next 1 or 2 seconds that the video plays or that the game loads and you start doing something about it inside the game, you will get this instinctive feeling. So by noticing it more and more, and trying to understand where this feeling comes from, whether it's difficulty or annoyance or just a feeling of this element doesn't match the situation or whatever it is. And by the way, this can be positive too, right? When you hear the music coming to a game, you think, man, this feels really nice. Or you meet a new character and the character is beautiful, they're beautifully designed, you're like, man, that's a nice character. That feeling is equally important to tell you what's good about the game and what you should definitely not touch and destroy now that you've got such a nice element in the game. So that instinctive reaction happens in that first 1 to 2 seconds when you encounter something new. And I found that the more I pay attention to it, the more I can both find the good points of a game, the things that we definitely shouldn't change if we can afford to about the game, and also find the most problematic, the most annoying, the most difficult things about the game that if we can do something about, we should do something about as quickly as possible before the game goes out. And in the beginning I said we often know that our game has all these things we could be doing better, right? Better monsters, better combat, better visuals, better story, and so on. But all these things exist on a time horizon inside the game. So what I mean by that is, let's say for example you have a great idea to improve the last boss of the game. That happens maybe 100 hours into the game. So should you work on that, or should you work on something that happens in the first 10 seconds of the game? Well, the answer should be obvious with this, because most people will encounter things that are earlier in the game than later in the game. Does that mean that you should never work on things later in the game? Of course not. But when doing this evaluation, when applying this technique of listening to your gut response to these things, to check your reflex about every element of the game, starting from things that are closer to the beginning of the player experience and working through the game in more and more depth as you perform this check, in a simple mathematical way, will make sure that more people will enjoy more things about the game. And it's one of the best ways that I have found to apply this reflex, this gut reaction, to check various areas of the game inside development. So I know this is a very nuanced topic. Like I said, for myself, it was several years, many years, before I became conscious of this feeling and I started using it more consciously. So I'm curious if other people have felt it and what your experience is with it. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and for watching, and as always, have fun.